Hello, I am Seth Emerson of the Macon Telegraph and McClatchy Newspapers, and you are?
Gentry Estes, Dogs 247.
We have not done a Gentry and Seth show for some time since the SEC Championship game, so we're not going to beat you over the head with it. We're not going to talk endlessly about it, just a couple minutes to sum up, since we didn't have that opportunity. And we especially don't want to spend the whole time talking about the last 15 seconds because it's been talked about ad nauseum. And Gentry, you and I are pretty much of the same mind of that last 15 seconds, which is...
Yeah, I mean, I think that my issue wasn't necessarily with the decision to spike the ball. Like, so many people wanted to talk about the decision to spike the ball, and in hindsight, they probably should have. But to me, it was more about the play that was called versus the decision to actually spike the ball. It just seemed, a fade to the back shoulder throw just seemed like a low percentage kind of play for me in that scenario.
You were on the short side of the field, and you were throwing at a 6'1" guy, Malcolm Mitchell, who's certainly going to be pretty heavily guarded. It just wasn't, to me, enough. The problem they keep talking about, Mark Rick always says, the problem wasn't not spiking the ball, it was that the ball was tipped. Well, the ball was tipped because the play wasn't, a high percentage play.
Well, and there were a couple of things. They wasted a few seconds getting the play off.
Yeah.
There was some miscommunication there, and you've got a guy running a route inside the 5-yard line. You can't expect the ball's going to be tipped, and Murray clearly wasn't throwing it to Chris Conley, but the way it worked out, why not send everybody to the end zone?
But you were in that position, Georgia was. But in your mind, people are talking way too much about what happened in the last 15 seconds versus...
Well, I mean, it got painted as that was the reason Georgia lost this game, and I don't... Georgia didn't lose the game because of what happened in the last 15 seconds. Georgia lost this game because they allowed 350 rushing yards.
Right.
Alabama was able to do what they wanted to do offensively at a very key point in that game. When Georgia got up after the Ogletree returned the field goal, I mean, Georgia was in a position where with a couple of stops, they really could have clamped down and
the game went from 21-10 to 25-21
very quickly.
Yeah.
And Alabama started ripping them, and it wasn't complex what Alabama was doing. They were just beating them up front, and that was the best offensive line Georgia's seen this year. We'll probably see next year. We'll probably see for a long time.
But what happened out of that game, Gentry, is that a Georgia team that went in with a lot of doubters, a lot of people who thought this would be a runaway, a lot of people whose memory of Georgia from this season was going to be 35-7 at South Carolina. A lot of people who still remember the LSU SEC championship game last year, 42-10. That Georgia team went in there and they proved themselves. They showed that they weren't a product of their schedule because they played big boy football, as Tony Kornheiser said about Georgia and Alabama in that game. They showed they belonged on the field, and the takeaway out of that game for a lot of people wasn't just what happened in the last 15 seconds, but it was that Georgia's a really good team. Georgia deserved to be on the field with Alabama. That Georgia, not Florida, should be in the Sugar Bowl, whereas you never heard any of that last year.
No, absolutely, and I think that was the big takeaway for this program because I think going into that game that most people thought Georgia would be competitive with Alabama, but Alabama was the one that had proved themselves on that big stage, and Georgia hadn't yet. Georgia had struggled against a team in South Carolina that was going to be similar, and there were some people not really knowing what to expect, but Georgia played really well in that game. To me, they gained a little respect with how they handled Florida earlier in the year. People want to talk about the 6 turnovers and all that. You know what? Georgia forced a lot of those turnovers. They kept Florida from doing what they wanted to do offensively and made them throw it. Against Alabama, they weren't able to do that, but I think really the respect is just in the fact that was a great game. I mean, it really was. Back and forth and just a classic. And Georgia stood toe-to-toe with a team that probably will go win the national championship.
I'll tell you, I got asked this on a radio interview a few days later, and my initial feeling was this also could prove to be a huge missed opportunity for the program because when are you again going to be that close in that position, what amounted to a national semifinal? But the more I've thought about it, Gentry, number one, you're going to a 4-team playoff in 2014, which means that after one more season, there's going to be 2 SEC teams in that playoff every year, and Georgia has a better chance of being that. And number two, we know that this offense is going to return a lot of people, and the question is going to be Aaron Murray. But on defense, I'm not sure the defense is going to be quite as bad next year. Not even bad. It's not going to have as steep a drop-off. I mean, look at the defensive performance this year. In a year where the defense should have been all-world and had all these guys that are going to be in the NFL and everything, they finished, or at this point, they were, 6th in the SEC?
Yeah, and I mean, struggled for almost 2/3 of the year, really, and I think that... Yeah, I mean, these aren't the 85 Bears you're having to replace here.
Right.
I think you have some very capable...
Got a lot of talent.
you have some capable young players on the defense, but the thing is, people don't know a lot of what these guys can do because you just haven't seen them. Grantham didn't sub that much, so I think that there's the question marks are guys that really haven't had a lot of playing time, but I think there's plenty there.
Well, we could break down what next year's 2D will be, but we've got to save something for a future broadcast. But I mean, I hate to come off, like a homer and what's the opposite of Debbie Downer? Like
Sunshine.
Otter optimistic, Seth Sunshine. But I just left that championship game feeling a lot better about this program and its future. We have a very loud trash compactor going through.
As you can tell, we're sitting out here at the Buttsmeer building, actually. That's the practice field behind us, where Georgia's not practicing today.
Which is why we're allowed to be out here filming right here. But let's vamp more. Okay,
but no, I think coming off that game, that's obviously something that's going to be the most watched game in the country other than the national championship game. And I think for Georgia to perform as well as they did, because that could have gone another way. If you don't perform well, it could really hurt you.
If you don't perform in that game, then people are tiering the programs differently at this point.
And
they're going, but right now they're saying Georgia's right there with. I mean, Alabama's just kind of playing on its own level performance at this point, but Georgia's there with Florida and LSU and South Carolina.
That performance was significant, just because
Texas A&M.
If Georgia had not played well and gotten blown out in that game, it would have confirmed what so many people were saying about this soft team that wasn't ready for prime time and. Who got there because their schedule has been easy the last couple of years. It would have confirmed all that. Georgia didn't do that. I thought it was very significant that they went toe-to-toe with Alabama the way they did. That said, you want to win the game.
Right.
That's the next step, and they got real close.
Again, we want to hold off on breaking down Nebraska and stuff because we're both going to be in Orlando starting on the 26th. So I think we're going to be doing about 3-4 videos a day.
Let's not commit to that.
Okay. Well, I don't have anything better to do until the wife gets down there. But I think what everyone is interested temporarily until they play another game on January 1st is next year. Just talking real quick about the NFL guys. Jarvis Jones out, Ogletree. Yeah. Kwame Gathers.
That's the one I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't think we have a read on him yet.
No. And to me, that's an underplayed story because if you've got a big physical nose guard, look at the difference in defense between 2010 and 2011. Everyone talked about, John Jenkins made it. Well, actually, Kwame Gathers played as much as John Jenkins last year. So if you got, you're losing John Jenkins, but if Kwame Gathers comes back as that big 350-pound nose guard as a senior, that's a big difference than either Mike Thornton or John Taylor.
Yeah, you're going to have a redshirt freshman in that role if he doesn't, probably.
Or a freshman.
And I think that, obviously you want him to stay. And I think it would make sense for him to stay just because he hasn't been, he's played a lot, but he hasn't been the guy.
It's funny, if it weren't for his family history, everyone would have a different, I think, assumption about whether he's going pro or not.
You may be right. I think that's kind of been the case all along.
On Aaron Murray, I think most people still think he's going to come back, but in my estimation, I'm a little less sure of that than I was maybe a month ago.
I think he's going to come back. I'd be real surprised if he didn't.
I still would be, but he hasn't come out and said it. He's been very close to the vest on that, and I think the one thing that has to give him some pause is if the main thing holding him back is his height. It's not like he's going to grow a couple inches in a year. But you come back for your senior year, you win a few more big games.
I saw Aaron after the SEC championship game when he was sitting in that tunnel doing interviews, and that's the moment where it occurred to me this kid's coming back. I think had they won that game and then had the ability to go on and win a national title, maybe it's different. But I think he'll come back. But we'll see. We never know. Never know until they say it.
Until we see you again. Any other burning issues that you think over the next week or so?
We haven't even touched on basketball yet. Do we
want to touch on basketball? Well, a lot of you may be watching this video after they've played Mercer tomorrow, when either Georgia will have gone to 2-8 with yet another home loss to a team they have no business losing to, or they've beaten Mercer to get to 3-7.
I'll say this though: the freshmen emerging in the last game is a big theme for this team, and they need more scores, and I think they have them out of that freshman group, but they'll give them some minutes.
I think this team has a chance to. It's almost sad you're saying this, but they can get to that 10, 12, 13 win mark by the end of the year if this trend continues. But the SEC isn't great.
It's not. And
the
schedule is different too this year, in that there are some tough games, but you only get Kentucky one time.
Yeah.
There's some others. So
South Carolina twice, and South Carolina's horrible.
Yeah, and so it'll be
Mississippi State's horrible.
Well, I do think this team will improve, and I think people are obviously down on things right now with basketball,
Yeah.
and there's good reason
I mean,
for
as
the
you
record
should,
being
yeah.
what it
I mean,
is.
2-7 losing to the teams you've lost to. I still cannot.
Some key guys are young players on this team.
I can't
freshmen.
reconcile how a team that was leading Indiana and UCLA at the half can't beat Southern Miss, Iona,
because
and
they play very
Youngstown State at
because
home.
they play very good defense and can't score the ball, and you're gonna. There'll be a game or two, and it happened last year.
Yeah.
There'll be a game or two where they shoot it well and just
Right.
play that same good defense and beat somebody they're not
It
supposed
was
to. They beat Florida pretty bad here
last year. Half court offense is a mess. They got to figure that out. And with the point guard situation, they missed Gerald Robinson.
They do
a lot more.
a guy who could
Yeah.
create and score. And
because right now they got Contavious or nothing.
true.
And that's that. We will see you next week in Orlando. In the meantime, please continue visiting our websites. And in the meantime, happy holidays and Merry Christmas to everybody.